because I'm like really into good design, or try to be anyway. And the reason I started my property development training business over 10 years ago was because I really wanted to encourage other developers to, really focus on design and do good stuff, because there's been a lot of crap development over the years which I really don't like, and it actually gets us all a bad name. So the first big sort of designy organisation I'm going to say that I really remember in a big way was CABE. Was there much before that?
There was the Royal Fine Arts Commission before CABE, but it did design review, but it didn't do as much. And there was a real revolution in sort of turn of the century with the Urban Renaissance report and the compact city approach. And I think it started with, there was I might get it wrong, apologies if my memory is wrong. Was it John Gummer who did the report into planning in towns and cities? And that sort of led into when it was the new Labour government from 1997 onwards, they really got involved with place design and place quality, and they set up CABE.
Do you want to just explain what that is?
So CABE was the Commission for Architecture and Built Environment, and I joined it when there were 20 people there. John Rouse was the chief exec. He was absolutely amazing. I learned so much. It was like the most inspirational place to go to work. It was like an academy of people who had been frustrated because place design hadn't been on the agenda, and all of a sudden there was this organisation that was allowed to do things. It was so refreshing. So it was things like, at that point in time, we had in the planning world, we had lots of PPGs, and then they became PPSs. So it was one on housing, one on green belt, whatever it is, and they had design stuff in them all over the place. So one of the first things that we did when I started there was do something called Design at a Glance, which was literally take the policies out of all these 20 different documents and put them on one little concertina booklet that you could put in a pocket.
I had it.
You had it?
Yeah.
Okay. So that took 2 weeks and £2,000. And that's what CABE was like then. It was just like you saw a need and you did it. It was revolutionary. And all of a sudden there was the support from government, there was a bit of funding, there was energy, and there was need. Because we'd moved from a time when the PPG, if you remember the PPG one that said design is not a planning issue, and if local authorities refuse schemes on design terms, they will be awarded costs against them. That was the national policy up until the sort of late 1990s, turn of the century. So, nobody could do anything on place design. It was about 11 years, I think. I think it was got rid of by the government that came in 2011. It had swollen a lot by then. It was big. It was a bit more clunky, maybe. It had achieved a massive amount, but it also got got problems. It wasn't like this way or that way.
I must admit, I around that time was involved in some quite big schemes. We also had to go to design review things with CABE and stuff like that. They were a big pain in the arse, to be quite honest.
Well, I'd left by 2005 because I looked at the work programme and thought, I've not got much to add to this. This isn't for me. So I'd gone on secondment to set up work on UDL.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd be going back to CABE, but it didn't ever suggest to me that I wanted to go back. There wasn't, that work programme hadn't got the energy it had in its early days.
Yeah.
So I stayed at UDL because I thought I could do more good there. And UDL is hosted by Transport for London, so I was very involved at that time with the GLA, TfL, LDA, London Development Agency, and even the HCO, which was the other part of the mayoral organisations. And that was really interesting with the first couple of London plans, particularly the implementation of that first London plan. There was so much going on where that Urban Renaissance report, ideas of compact city were really being delivered. So it was fascinating seeing what London was doing up until after the Olympics. It's been a little bit different story, I think, since 2013, 14. Money hasn't been the same.
Yeah.
It achieved so much, so it got harder and harder to keep achieving, to be honest, and different challenges. CABE kind of has now gone. Then we had the Office of Place for a little bit, and that's gone now.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you think we should have next. I don't know.
Obviously, what you're doing at UDL is fantastic because every place is different. I personally think local authorities really need to have the sort of knowledge and help that you give them in-house there rather than some big organisation sort of making decisions and forcing stuff on people. I mean, no one knows their local area better than the local planners and the local people. That's what I think. But as long as the local authorities have got the sort of knowledge and the resources to sort of know what they're doing, really. What do you think?
Well,
about
that? They don't at the moment. I mean, of those 20 years, this is the worst. The year, I think, our contact with all these different local authorities, planning authorities, is probably the hardest year ever.
This year?
This year. Their finances, their staffing, their resources, I think is the worst it's been. That's my perception. I might be wrong, but that's what I'm hearing. We have about 75, 76 local authority members, so we talk to across the country, all of the London ones and then the other non-33 ones outside London. They're really struggling. So there's so much challenge with housing targets, with finances, with viability, with a churn in the planning system. We seem to have been going through planning reform forever. It will settle down now, I think, but we're still not there until we've got the National Development Management Policies, new style local plans, the National Design Guide and Code published, etc., Manual for Streets, which is meant to be coming out. So there's still a lot of new stuff. We've had massive challenges with the building safety requirements. That in the cities with tall buildings, that has just kind of schemes at the moment, and again it will settle, but right now it's in not good. And then biodiversity net gain also put a lot of new strain into the system. So there's so much people in local authorities need to learn. At the same time that there's less of them, they're hemorrhaging people who've been there a long time with that institutional knowledge. They maybe not work. They're more remote working, so maybe they're not picking up so much from team members as well. So there's an isolation, there's a lack of confidence. People go into planning in the public sector because they want to make a difference. They don't do it for money because they won't get it. They're going to get grief, and they know they're going to get grief, but they really believe that they can do something better. They probably... I'm rambling a bit here, Paul. Stop me if I want to, but I think there's kind of two groups of planners. There's one that thinks planning exists to facilitate more growth, and there's one that thinks planning exists to manage development in the public good. And it used to be that those two things were joined together, but it feels like they've been separated to a certain extent, and you have teams within planning who believe one of those two things is the most important or the only important thing they're doing. So, the public good, if you take growth out of it, whether it's about neighbourliness, it's about environmental custodianship, it's about inclusion, it's whatever, it's that kind of public good. It's saying the development of land is managed to the benefit of everybody who's affected by that land and what happens on it, which I think is kind of the basis of the planning system. But then over time we've had more the economic development, regeneration side of planning, which is planning as a vehicle to identify sites for development and make sure they get delivered. So you've got these two kind of concepts which are rubbing up against each other more and more, I think.
This is super interesting. I've got to tell you, and it's actually one of my sort of pet issues or subjects, The way it seems to me, the whole reason for doing this, as you know, is to get more understanding and collaboration out there in terms of planners understanding developers, developers understanding planners, and all the other people that are involved in the process as well. So for me, from a developer's point of view, this is my 40th year doing this, right? Starting off doing really small stuff years and years ago. Planning, it seemed to me, had been quite anti-development, and the general... It almost felt like they thought their job was to stop you doing stuff, right? And that's why, for a very long time, it was the Development Control Department. It's only relatively recently people have started calling themselves Development Management. Seriously, I think that says it all to me, and that sort of ties in with what you just said about the different things they're sort of focusing on. Now, planning in general, I think certainly high level, central government has been more pro-development than it's ever been. So it seemed to me for a long time planning was largely felt quite anti-development. Now in theory, it's actually generally quite pro-development, but of course, the system is now just at a time when the system is massively under-resourced. Interestingly, stuff is increasingly unviable.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the other bit to it. That's the third thing, which planning, kind of like the basis of planning. You've got management, development, public good, facilitate growth, and then you've got make money. Tax development to pay for things. And that changed massively from, in this century in terms of social housing, affordable housing, or subsidised housing, whatever words you want to use. Yeah. So the concept that more and more we expect development of housing to fund subsidised housing for those in need, which obviously we need, but the link specifically to individual development projects, as well as all the other Section 106 requirements and other things which are now, mentioned building safety and BNG, which are putting cost onto planning, onto development. It's kind of like it's seen a bit of, it has also been seen as a cash cow to pay for things that are needed. Because if you go back from when you were, starting off, planning gain was literally paying for the road that serves your site. Yeah. And it was only things which were specifically relevant to that site, wasn't it? And now it's kind of like Section 106, we need all these things, and the viability has just blown out the water unless you can build in a way that doesn't deliver those public goods. So we've got this circle of these three things which are pulling in different directions. They're not. I don't think anyone is really looking at the interplay between them in a systematic way to make sure it's balanced so it can deliver. Yeah. And that's what I think we see over and over again is they're pulling apart, and maybe one triumphs in one scheme, but it's such a battle to get there that a lot of the time everything falls apart. That scheme falls over. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got someone very interesting geared up for a future podcast, and they are like experts in land value capture, which you will know all about. And I was with them the other day, and we were having a little bit of a chat about it, all the rest of it. I actually don't think anyone should be able to own land at all. That's how alternative hippie I am, right? Land's worth what it's worth. People own it. People control it. You've got existing use values. That is just how it is. Now, there's been numerous attempts to capture land value over the years via various development land taxes, as you know, and pretty much every time they've happened in the past, usually it's the Labour Party putting them on. Everyone sits on their land, no one sells, and then they wait for the Tories to get back in, they take it off, and then it all starts again, right? Now, very cleverly, actually, what's happened over the years is more and more, let's just call them stealth taxes, have been added to land, right? Affordable housing, massively important. When I first started, there was no affordable housing policy. It was just coming out. I'm going to say Circular 694. Is that right? Do you remember?
I don't remember that.
Okay.
I'll take your word for it.
It
sounds about right. Right.
Yeah. So there wasn't any affordable housing policy.
It wasn't called that then, though.
What would it have been first called?
I think it would have been called social housing or subsidised housing.
So this is terrible. I actually did my dissertation, believe it or not, on looking into the impacts of affordable. I'm sure it was affordable.
Maybe it was affordable.
I'm going to have to.
Oh yeah, but maybe I just never quite understand that, because it means that the other housing is unaffordable, which is true, but it's not a good bit of marketing.
If this was a proper podcast with an assistant, I could ask them to Google it for me. we haven't got that, so we'll Google it and we'll find out. I'm pretty sure it was 694, the circular. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was originally affordable. They started calling it affordable housing, but who knows? Might be wrong, right? But didn't exist. Should do, obviously. No one's arguing it's really important, massively important. Affordable housing policy, and this is meant to be a bit educational, so what I'm talking about now, I know you know this, but this is for people out there that need to know this, that don't get how it all really works, because people thinking, well, it's just greedy developers making fortunes, that's just really not going to help, right? So it's important that people understand how it works. years ago, there wasn't any affordable housing policy in terms of private developers and land having to provide it. It was all built by councils, right, largely. Affordable housing requirements increased, quite rightly, right, as need increased and all the rest of it. But of course, that can be a big cost on the value of the land. The grant or the value that you got for the affordable housing massively decreased.
Absolutely,
This is all happening over slowly over time.
Was that 2011 or something like that?
Something like that. Something like that. You then, of course, get more, Section 106 requirements, additional contributions required for all sorts of other things. And I'm not saying any of this isn't important or shouldn't be required. I'm just trying to get people that don't know to understand the whole viability issue. Then, of course, you got community infrastructure levy, really designed to replace Section 106. It didn't replace it, so you've now ended up with both. So that is really pure land tax. And now, more recently, you've got things like BNG, nutrient neutrality, water neutrality, a whole load of other stuff that developments got to pay for, right? And of course, the issue is, and then, of course, build costs, development costs probably gone up 30-40% over the last 5 years, right? So the result of that is we're now in a situation, and this has been increasingly getting this way, where the system, let's just call it, trying to squeeze more and more value out of the land to pay for stuff, right? And it's got to the point whereby, well, it just isn't viable. You know, land values are getting pushed, below or at existing use values. So landowners just won't sell. It just doesn't make any sense. They might as well just leave the land doing whatever it's doing at the moment. But and on top of that, of course, developers still want to build, right? And it's getting increasingly difficult, and has been for years. But we still just want to do what we do and build houses for people. And what ends up happening there is developers end up getting forced to cut their margins, and development's risky enough anyway, right? Without doing it on cut margins. And basically what happens is, if the market goes up and therefore end values go up,
that's all right.
They might get an all right margin, and they get some out of the shit, and they survive, and they might make a few quid until the market goes flat or down, and then they all go bust and disappear. I was talking to someone about this the other day, about viability and stuff like that, and I know it was someone a little bit more on the sort of public sector or didn't really understand its side, and they were just sort of saying, well, that's just tough luck then, isn't it? And I'm like, well, but then no one gets any housing, and all the, we've got. Well, actually, this leads us quite nicely onto good design and SME developers, right? I actually think smaller developers build the best stuff. Major house builders, nothing wrong with them. I used to work for them. Some are better than others, but they've got a very specific model, right? It is the smaller developers, the ones we really, really, really need, that are the ones that get squeezed the most by all of this. So unless all of this gets recognised and addressed, all that happens is things that we're going to get even less housing, just at a time when development planning policy is trying to be pro-development, and we need it more than ever. I've waffled on massively.
I totally agree with you. It's like a perfect storm, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
And then what happens on the politics side is, because of those margins being squeezed, kind of the densities are pushed up. And to a certain extent, in some areas, the quality does come down as well, the build quality and the design quality, those slightly different things. And then the schemes become less palatable for the local community. And then we sort of talking before we started recording about councillors, and then it becomes very difficult on that side, because there's kind of a belief that you can ever increase density, and as long as it's well designed, whatever that might mean, it's fine. Well, I haven't seen that. There's a ceiling beyond which it is very difficult to create good places unless you put so much money into the maintenance and the management and the servicing, and ensure, and actually, to be honest, the people living there have a lot of money to spend on their lifestyles. Very high density social housing, affordable housing, or for higher occupancy, and it's not luxury kind of stuff where people have got a weekend cottage in another part of the world or something like that. It is really hard to get the livability, the sustainability, and the neighbourliness of those schemes at very high densities. People don't like them. They don't like living in them, or they don't like living near them. And the other concept which is into this with growth is the idea that you can piggyback off existing facilities and services. And this makes your argument doubly correct, because you can't afford to put in more services and facilities. So, there's already something there. So we don't really look to see whether there's a capacity or not, particularly, say a small park or some playground or whatever it happens to be. We probably look at capacity with education and health because they're dealt with separately. But anything else is kind of, it exists, we can put more people to use it. And therefore that's good. So we're densifying and densifying. But we don't really have a concept of what a suitable carrying capacity in terms of a gross density for that area should be. We just kind of go, every single site, just max it out to make it viable so we get homes. And you can understand why, absolutely, but I worry that that's not going to be good in the long term. We're probably building problems for our children and our grandchildren, to be honest. I don't know what the answer to it is. It's kind of, maybe it's all sort of mature Western capitalist societies are going through something similar, and there isn't the bagginess in the economy to be able to pay for what we need to be doing. So we're trying to get it off developers or trying to piggyback off existing resources or services. So it's quite a complex kind of package that is then stymising planning, because those problems cause kickback socially, which is part of, I know the government's like going to have a central system of delegation, so it's going to take some decisions away from, or a lot of decisions away from local councillors, but there's still going to be political ramifications from this. I don't know if that kind of builds on what you're saying, Paul.
It does, and it's really interesting, isn't it? 20 years ago, there weren't really that many tall buildings in London, certainly not residential, right? So this whole issue, and particularly green belt policy, effectively putting a stranglehold on things, has forced, or did force, higher densities. It's really interesting, you talked about PPGs earlier. So PPG3 was really the big one that sort of first kicked it off in terms of higher densities and stuff like that. And you'll remember, you could actually get refused for not being dense enough. Do you remember that?
Oh, God, yeah, because before PPG3, there was minimum car parking spaces and maximum densities, and then it turned it round to maximum car parking, which was a fantastic change in policy. But, like in the London situation, we then had the SRQ, the Sustainable Residential Quality Matrix in the London plan, which was setting targets for net site densities based which were different locations, to kind of the character of the area, roughly suburban, inner, whatever.
The PTAL matrix.
And the PTAL with public transport accessibility levels, which were basically, can you get onto the system? It didn't matter how far you could get or how much it cost or whether you had any local facilities. So there's a relationship between, let's have higher densities where you can get onto a public transport system, kind of was embedded into the psyche of planning in London at that point. That was the first London plan.
I actually thought that was fairly sensible, didn't you?
But it was based, absolutely, but it was based on research of, I think it was, from memory, about 100 schemes were assessed to see what were they good enough in terms of quality. If they met the quality standards that were used, I think it might have been Building for Life. Someone else would know, like Patrick Clark, who I think did it. And then what density did they achieve when they were meeting quality standards? So that was where the ranges were set. What happened afterwards was the planning system, as far as I could see anyway, the planning system became more and more housing target driven. And hang on a minute, if we count up the number of sites we've got, we times them by the middle of, let's say, of these ranges, we don't meet the housing target. So we better bump the ranges up. And then the ranges were bumped up, and then they were bumped up, and then they were bumped up. And that's because the targets are not capacity driven, they are market driven, the housing targets. And so eventually, in the last London plan, the matrix was removed because research had shown that, again, apologies if I got exactly wrong figure, but it was about 75% of the schemes approved were not within the ranges. So there's no point in having a matrix which is not being applied. So Most of them were above. Some were below, but most of them were above the ranges. Even though the ranges had been bumped up, no one really looked to see whether the quality of those places was still being delivered. That was kind of like just lost in the ether.
You say that, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but in terms of the whole quality thing, maybe wrongly, from a developer's point of view, is that's quite good, because you will remember this. I remember for so many years it was like literally planning by numbers, right? Lots of this was driven by the Essex Design Guide, which I think has got a lot to answer for, not good in a lot of ways, where the number of schemes I can tell you about that got refused, or you couldn't make them work because you didn't have 21 meters back to back. You were 20.9, and literally the scheme would get booted out for 100 mil, or density policy said 100 habitable rooms an acre or something like that, and you were 101. I mean, it was just literally crazy planning by numbers. So I actually liked the density matrix thing, because what that said to me is like, it takes away a lot of the silly arguments or reasons that you got refused as a developer, right? Still, obviously, it's got to be good design and all the rest of it, but they sort of couldn't hit you with the easy refusal, you're too dense. That's how it seemed to me. Well, that's what I liked about it anyway. Obviously, it's still got to be good design, and if it wasn't, they would still quite rightly refuse you for good design. So do you not think that was sort of fairly well covered? And CABE were around then as well.
Yeah.
So,
well, from UDL's side, we did a lot of events on what should the last London plan say about density and tall buildings and stuff and quality. And from those events, there was like 300-400 people involved in them and whatever. It kind of came out that...
What type of people, just out of interest?
Well, mainly our side, as it were, the local authorities, because that's who we talk to, who our members are, but there were others there as well. And it was very much, we can't use a matrix, we can't keep a matrix we're not using, but what can we do other than that? And so the concept of density as an output from design rather than an input from design was sort of discussed, and actually that kind of went into the current London plan, in terms of, if you're clear on what you want to achieve in terms of quality outputs, then you can, if your design is informed by those, then it will reach an appropriate density for the site. And those qualitative outputs are things like natural lighting levels, privacy levels. And then there's another level of qualities which are about how the areas around the development and between the buildings, whether they're shared spaces or communal or public work, again, are they getting light levels or whatever. But the policies were very much then kind of, just make it work without setting performance thresholds to these things. But it's actually the performance thresholds which could then be delivered in different ways. So you mentioned the 21 metre back-to-back distances, which is about, we assume, nobody really knows. I mean, David Birkbeck makes jokes about it being nipple test.
It does come from the nipple test.
The nipple test. So it's about, if you say, that's the distance that by which you can't see a human nipple is 21 metres or something like that. Therefore, windows need to be that far apart, so if you look out of one and someone's undressing another, they've got privacy. Kind of like, does everyone who applies that policy know what it's for? No, because the policy doesn't actually say that is what it's for. Now, if the policy says we want a certain level of visual privacy to bedrooms, so you can't be overlooked in your bedroom or your toilet, then you can check that. You can do that, as we know from good designs, in other ways with angled bedrooms, offsetting, etc., etc. But if planning policies don't say what they're trying to achieve in terms of the qualities, visual privacy, another one being natural light levels and ventilation, so we end up with a policy about dual aspect units. It's not the fact they're dual aspect that matters, it's the fact that they have got natural light into the bits that people need natural light, and also that there's the opportunity for cross ventilation. Now, the ventilation you can do with mechanical ventilation depending on the site, again, if people understand that's what the policy is about. And that's why when you have this enhanced aspect, which is let's have a bay window or two windows that, it doesn't really help very much, because it doesn't get the light into the unit and it doesn't allow movement of air. So actually a policy that says we want these minimum light levels within these living spaces, kitchen, living room probably being the main ones, then that's a totally different way of checking whether the quality of those homes are right. Now, a lot of those home comforts are actually covered by the building regs, but some of them aren't. And so I think that's the conversations which are useful, as saying, well, should planning policy use proxies like dual aspect or 21 metres or a density range, or should it be clearer in setting what the performance standards are for the things that matter? And then it's up to the designers to make sure that they are delivered. In the past, that's very difficult for planners to check, because we hadn't had the systems that we have now, which could actually monitor at the planning application stage whether the scheme is going to deliver those things. But that's moving forward. So I think there is the potential for planning policy to be much better in the future, where it is much clearer, and there is a golden thread through what is the objective that we're trying to meet, visual privacy being one example of it. What are the forms that deliver visual privacy? Lots of different ones. That's up to you. But we're going to check that you're meeting the visual privacy, rather than saying you have to do it this way, which is the 21 metres. Yeah. So that's kind of that's where I hope this goes. But if you actually do that, you probably, if you set good enough standards, that may bring down the densities from where we've got at the moment, because the dual aspect thing always bugs me with this, is the way it works is the developer goes, oh, we've managed to get 50% of homes to have dual aspect. And then it was 40%, and now we've gone 50%. We've done much better. And the local authorities go, we've negotiated an improvement on that. Yay. Well, the other 50% of homes, people living in it, there's nothing. There's nothing to say what's the minimum light levels in their homes, because that development is tested on just a percentage which maybe you're okay, and it says nothing about the other ones. So actually having something, because if you live in one of the ones that doesn't have any natural light, doesn't have dual aspect, no one cares, no one's looked at that, and it doesn't matter to you that someone else has got a better flat, basically. It's not helping you very much. So actually saying all of them have got to have a minimum level of lighting is, it probably, from where we are now, it would bring down the densities of some of them, which is probably why, because I think we're building a lot of slums, basically, in some of the schemes at sea, in the highest densities. That will be pushed back against, because now we've got into that cycle you were talking about before, about viability, where it's assumed you can do these things, and that's feed through into all the pricing. So I think we're in potentially a good place where we can move planning policy to be more clear and more there's more clarity, certainty, but also opportunity to meet objectives in different ways. But also at the same time, I think the viability side of it now, we've accepted so much that I don't know if we can pull back, because we've already, what's the stats at the moment? 2/3 of London boroughs had no starts in the last quarter, something like that.
It's even more than that.
Is it even more now?
Yeah.
The GLA were quoting it. I mean, it's absolutely appalling. And a lot of that's down to the building safety thing. But that's a standard that's come in without testing its impact on viability. No one, when it was set.
Management and monitoring of that is not, again, something else that's not been properly resourced.
No.
And interestingly, and this is a thing that honestly, again, it's one of the other reasons for doing this. So this is one part of the thing that really, I'm trying not to say gets on my tits.
You can if you want to.
But it does.
You can't see them if you're 21 metres away.
Very
so
good,
all right.
very good. But whoever comes up with some of these policies, obviously not talking to the people, i.e. developers, that have to make them work. Because very often, if they just did and they understood, look, do you realise, obviously there are idiot arsehole developers out there, right? Of course there are, right? I'm trying to help get rid of them. No one wants that, right? But honestly, in my experience, the vast majority of them, certainly way better than they used to be in the olden days, they do want to do the right thing, right? And it is a really, really hard job. If the policymakers talk to the people trying to do it and understand the implications, and things would be a lot easier.
It certainly would. And we did a couple of UDL events on the building safety, to understand how to deal with the building safety requirements, the current ones. Last one was about 6 weeks ago or something like that, 2 months ago. And we had one of the speakers, I think, knew a lot, and I believe, maybe wrong, was involved in the creation of the current requirements. And I did ask the question, did anyone check what the requirements are? So if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about here, this is to have multiple stairs and lifts within tall buildings over 6 floors, stories, 18 metres. And that they're all sort of hermetically sealed, so that they don't link through basements, and that you come down one of them, you can get out to the street, and then you can go back in from the street to another one. So did anyone check that? That works for the fire issue, but did anyone think about what it does for the amount of the building that is used for it can make money versus the gross to net internal use, also what it does to the ground floors of those buildings, what it does to people trying to kind of safety wise, if you're bringing your bin bag down and you have to go out to the pavement, round a building and in another door to get to the bin store, etc. What it does to big schemes which have got multiple connected basements. So this is why things are not getting built, because those ramifications of that is you end up with bigger, fatter buildings, which have townscape issues and often, might not work on some of the sites that have been identified for development, as well as causing other problems for other design objectives. Yeah. And that just doesn't feel like it has been tested out. Hopefully somebody at some point will do that and will find a sweet spot that works better for all the objectives. I mean, obviously after Grenfell, no one wants to see anything like that happen ever, anything at all. But, actually understand, were there options other than what we've got now, which would have been easier to design and deliver? I think you're absolutely right. I haven't seen any evidence that those conversations have, if they've happened, if they've led to anything.
You mentioned bins.
Oh,
talk
yeah.
to you about bins at some point. Remind me to come back to bins.
Okay. That's a David thing, isn't it?
As you mentioned.
Bins, bikes. Bins, bikes.
Well, I've got to tell you, so people that I talk to and train, the amount of schemes that get refused and booted out because of bins and bikes. Going back to
where we're talking about the London plan losing the density matrix, that causes a problem for people doing their SHLA, if I always get it wrong, Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment. I hope I got that one right.
You did, very good.
Hey, dyslexia doesn't help when you've got all these acronyms. Because, as I said, it's a useful thing. You know what the rough density is, you know the number of sites, you add them up. Oh, hey, presto, we've got enough or we haven't. So there's a feeling to bring something back, but really feeling that what I was saying about the carrying capacity of a neighbourhood cope with growth, but also to understand that you need a certain density of people to get the facilities into a neighbourhood to work. So a lot of the opportunities now in London particularly, but elsewhere in the country as well, is about suburbs. Suburbs, generally speaking, they're all very different, but generally speaking, they're dormitories. They were designed and built for people to sleep in and go and live their lives somewhere else. So they don't tend to have massively good local facilities. If you can make them more able to have local stuff, so that living local is an option, then you are not reliant on very expensive travel infrastructure to increase densities. So we kind of came up from UDL with something called the multi-timed place or multi-timed city approach, which talks about the needs that should be in a place at the home circle, neighbourhood and city civic life levels. And the home circle is kind of having facilities that support you in your home or just outside your home to be able to do things well there, and then shared with a few neighbours, your neighbour spaces, which, the whole idea is if you share some spaces with some people, you don't need quite so much private space, so you can increase densities a little bit that way. And then, of course, your neighbourhood facilities as well, which, this is an antidote. Multi-timed place is an antidote to the 15-minute city concept. And you still need to be able to get to things maybe not less often, which maybe are an hour away or something like that. So things which are in a home circle you're using every day, not as many people use each one, but they're using them all the time. Civic life, a long way away. Millions of people might use that theatre, but they maybe do it once a year or twice a year. That's the concept of catchment areas. So the multi-time city approach, you could start to use that to understand what is an optimum neighbourhood gross density with these facilities in it, so that you can actually start to look at existing places and say, well, their gross density at the moment is there, and that kind of people are car dependent.
Tell me how you're calculating gross density.
There's a concept at the moment, so it would probably be habitable rooms per hectare, I would have thought. And it's going to be obviously lower than a site net density because it's counting all the hectares that are not got habitable rooms on them, but which have got things on people in those habitable rooms need. So you're actually taking that into account. So if you say your gross neighbourhood density is X, but actually it could work very well as Y, how do we get it to Y in terms of has it got the right facilities within it yet so far, or can we increase those if it hasn't? And can we then use that Y to then look at the individual sites to understand their role of each individual site and their site net density to upping the overall gross density of that neighbourhood and its carrying capacity. I'm probably not explaining this very well, but it kind of feels like it's potentially a different way of doing a density matrix, where instead of set site densities, you have gross neighbourhood densities within the matrix. And again, you can still add up how much of each neighbourhood type you've got, which accessibility level you've got to get your SHLA. But then you can also look at how you move neighbourhoods up the graph through proactive planning.
Yeah, I think I get it, and I like it in theory.
It's a theory.
But now coming back to this, like as someone trying to find sites and do deals and knowing the practicalities, I'm literally at the opposite end of the scale.
Yeah.
Like trying to persuade the landowner to sell me their land and get a deal to stack up. If you've got a site that could be a very big area where you could build a few good 100 homes, or it could be a single plot. Yeah, and there's obviously a big range between those. So obviously, if it's a really big scheme that you could sort of make it mixed use, I can probably guess. But tell me, what are some of these things you need locally?
If you think for your own home and your own life, if you share with your neighbours some garden space, play space, you do parking spaces, maybe gym spaces or spaces for activity where your deliveries are going, and then you move beyond that to kind of whether you've got some live work, some co-working spaces which can be flexible. You've got your community centre which has got used for the nursery and then the yoga and then the God knows what else. So it's nothing that you wouldn't be used to using, but if you have more things near your home, you have less need to travel. You reduce the amount of travel, and it's expensive travel in terms of infrastructure and actually doing it. You're more likely to be active travel. So if you've got a particular site, I haven't thought this out in.
No, it's good. That's what we're talking about. It's interesting.
But if you've got individual sites, really what this is about is knowing that site is within that neighbourhood at that moment, that neighbourhood through this work, because we've got all the data now. Is this neighbourhood density? It's got all these different facilities already. They're not up at capacity, so you can do a higher density scheme probably on that site, which is comfortable for that neighbourhood and it can carry it. For another site in another neighbourhood, or maybe it's a bigger site, I don't know, where it doesn't have all these facilities and it's maybe already at the top end of what it should have, what it was. But research is needed to be done to work out what the range would be for that neighbourhood. You'd think, well, actually, this site is only really going to be viable if infrastructure, if there's money going into infrastructure, which is going to improve that neighbourhood. If that happens, and there's enough sites in that neighbourhood to support that happening, or it's big infrastructure, say, then you might have a different view about what you can get on that site. So you can, if nothing happens there, you can go and get a bit on that site. If investment goes in, you understand that site as part of an invested in neighbourhood is going up that graph, up that matrix, and you can get more on it. This is not new. This is not new in terms of how transport planning is looked at. You invest in that area, you build more in that area. But it's kind of, we need a method that works for established areas, not just opportunity areas and big schemes, because all we've had with suburbs is Superbia and the Croydon stuff, which is basically just densify isolated car-dependent areas without changing their character in terms of what they make available to change suburban living to being more local living, so that we don't, we're not built. I mean, if you just say, fine, just build more in suburbia and people can just have more cars or just stay at home more and they don't have anything to do or anywhere to go, fine, that's great. But personally, I don't think that's a good way. And that's why politically, like Croydon, there's massive kickback, because you're just saying, we're just going to put more people here, but we're not going to do anything else, basically. That isn't a very good story. We're going to bring more people in, and those more people are going to ensure that you're going to get all these new things. That's a better story.
Let's use that as an example. So Croydon's a good example, right? There was a time when I'm going to say Croydon was probably the most pro-development local authority in London, ish, right? And and they had a really quite good, useful design guide.
The small sites one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it was quite good anyway. Yeah. Anyway, but of course, what happened then is, because of the viability issue, right? And I mean, this is another really big important subject, right? Trigger level for affordable housing's 10 units pretty much everywhere in London.
So you've got 9 everywhere.
Yeah, so you've got lots of, couple of semis or houses or bungalows with big gardens got knocked down, and someone built a 9-unit block of flats, right? Yeah. And a lot of them were really, really, really bad.
But that's happening all over. It's not just in Croydon, actually.
Yeah. But there was loads in Croydon because of the small sites policy and all the rest of it, right? Changed, and all of a sudden that was put to stop, exactly. And it went from probably one of the... I've got to be a bit careful here, actually, because I've got a little site in Croydon.
It's very different now. Croydon Council's doing really well now.
Yeah. Well, mine's going to be... It's a very nice one, as always. But they went from very easy to very difficult, right? And I'm not saying... I mean, look, I agree. A lot of those 9-unit blocks of flats, a lot of them were diabolical, right? But... So just putting that to one side, everywhere, like the Metro Land in particular, I know out your way, and my last site where we met and stuff like that, loads of 19s, 30s interwar semis, which are absolutely ripe for densification, but they're all in separate little ownerships. So unless someone does something major with compulsory purchase, and which I can't see that happening, and like selling big chunks of land that we're going to take your house off you, and then create a really well designed, let's call it neighbourhood scheme. Problem with the smaller sites. Now, if you've got a great big site, you can do it because you've got enough land to have all the mixed uses,
So what I'm trying to say with this neighbourhood approach is whether or not those schemes, some of them are well designed in terms of they look good or they didn't, they were still all taking 2 homes away and putting 9 homes with lots of parking and bins. Yeah. Basically. They didn't really kind of concept of what is it people like about their neighbourhood and their suburb, and the greenery, the outlooks, that side of it. They didn't take that into account at all. It was just like, just put more people in here. That's what it's about. That's why I think if some of those neighbourhoods, politically, if some of those neighbourhoods had something done to their parades, if some of them had some greening of the streets, if there's something that is improving, that is making the neighbourhood work better, function better as a neighbourhood, as well as bringing people in, then there is a conversation to be had locally with the yin and the yang of it. But it wasn't. It was just bring more people in. And that's why we need some form of planning approach which allows us to look comprehensively at neighbourhoods, about planning them for the future so they densify, but in a way that will improve them and not just bring people in. And to do that, you need to know how they're working now and what they've got in them, and have a concept of what they should have in them, and how many people you need in them to make those things work. So and again, you've still got the problem of who's going to sell their land, but you've got a long-term vision for that neighbourhood, which you can have a conversation about, which we haven't. We've been doing it with, neighbourhood planning's done it a little bit, not much. It's probably impossible. Paul, to be honest, it's probably impossible, but it's worth thinking about, because the alternative isn't great. If we can't understand how we can deal with neighbourhoods and gross densities and the facilities that are needed at different distances from people's homes, and how we can provide them, we're not going to get anywhere with densifying large parts of this 1.5 million homes. Is going to end up, most of it being on greenfield, because we're just not going to be supporting small builders. We're not going to be delivering small sites because the political backlash will be bad. But also, to be honest, the physical, the outcome is going to be, not great in terms of health and society and climate and etc. Just densifying suburbs by putting more people in them is not the answer, I don't think.
Right, just a quick one. Whether you are a massively experienced and well-established property developer already, or maybe you're a new or aspiring one, either way, you will know that it is really not easy to find viable opportunities to come up with the best scheme, the best design that's going to maximise the land value and fully de-risk things for you, and then to go on to get the very best planning permissions as quickly as possible. However experienced you are, you will know that that is not an easy thing. I have put together a super detailed scorecard based on my 40 years experience in this industry, reverse engineering everything that I've learned, including lots and lots of mistakes over the years, and everything I've done to maintain, touch wood, 100% planning track record. I'm pretty sure there will be stuff that you don't know. Go and do that scorecard. Find out just how good or not your current process is, and I absolutely guarantee you will learn at least a little something, if not a ton. So it's bit.ly/MLA score, all in capitals. You can do the Millbank Land Academy scorecard. I absolutely guarantee you will find some interesting stuff, and it will help you get much better deals. How much Section 106 and seal money isn't spent?
There's so many problems. There's so many. And I'm talking about concepts. I'm not talking about practice.
Yeah.
So when you come down to the practice, the concepts don't help very much. But if you don't have concepts, we can't change practice. So it's kind of going round and round in circles. But anyway, that was when the end of the conversation, maybe about density.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult one.
Interestingly, was it the end of the conversation or was it the start?
Of which conversation?
Well, I mean, I don't want to say I know your UDL are all over the place. So you're not just London.
No.
I like this. It's almost like a history of planning and how things changed and all the rest of it, right? So back to PPG free, brownfield first, higher densities. Yeah. There was load more flats, lots of townhouses. I don't know about you, probably same as you. I can, apart from the style and the whatever, you can always most see.
Yeah,
like the planning policy that made something happen just by if you know.
I know when that was built, because of that policy.
Exactly. So, this whole thing about pushing brownfield is right, absolutely is right, and it's been happening for years and years and years and years, and stuff has got, most of the viable brownfield stuff has been developed, right?
That's the easy stuff, anyway.
And it's got increasingly unviable and difficult to do. And I think, we developers have been sort of saying that for years, but no one sort of wanted to believe it. And you would say that, wouldn't you? But now it's getting recognised, and that's really what's driven the whole grey belt thing.
Oh God, yeah. That I'm guessing the problem we've just been talking about infill is difficult, and densifying established areas is difficult, and then the brownfield sites, the ones which. I was just in Leeds 2 days ago, and we've seen a couple of brilliant brownfield developments there. It's happened. There isn't that much left, which is not got so many constraints on it that the viability of actually these landlocked bits of land, they've got a railway one side, they've got a waterway the other side, they're contaminated, they've got a motorway on the third side, they've only got one bridge going into them, and we're still building on them, which is incredible. I mean, some of the stuff we see is amazing, but there becomes an end to it. So both of those avenues become very difficult. So you have to look at the green belt. I mean, we've been in a few workshops and meetings discussing it for the last few years, actually. And the concept of understanding what the purposes of the green belt. I was quite disappointed, really, that MPPF, the last one, didn't update the purposes particularly well. So it didn't. They're negative, the purposes. So it didn't bring in the concept of using Greenbelt. The Greenbelt is an amazing resource which has been created by planning policy, very strong planning impact. And I didn't start to say, well, let's use this amazing resource for the communities who in the urban areas they surround. More public access, better biodiversity, better opportunities for recreation and sport in them, better water management through them. None of these things, they're all in the nature recovery strategies, and the answer is, oh, you link the green belt to the nature recovery strategy. Well, they're two different things, and in planning terms, the nature recovery strategy doesn't have a leg to stand on, really. It's not a planning material consideration. It can be some form of consideration, but it's not a planning policy. So we ended up, didn't we, with the grey belt policy saying, well, we're going to take out the worst, the poorest performing bits of green belt to build on based on the existing negative purposes of the green belt. Anyone who's watching those are, I know I'm not, it's be between us, Paul, see if we can get them right, but there's 5 of them, and they're stopping large settlements from coalescing, the encroachment of the countryside, the setting of historic towns in the greenbelt. That's 3 of them, and then the other 2 are very similar to those 3 as far as I can tell.
They are, oh God.
But they're all about stopping something, basically. It's such a complicated policy area. It's areas which do not substantially contribute to the purposes of stopping encroachment into the countryside.
The key way I think about it is obviously if you're encroaching on or impacting, heritage assets and historic towns actually, then that's obvious.
Yeah.
It's really urban sprawl, I think.
Yeah, all the rest of them are basically the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I just think of it, if it's like, well, I'll give you a classic. I've got a site at the moment in a London borough, of probably the most anti-development London borough, right? It's a green belt. It's surrounded on all sides by development, right? So absolutely, that does not contribute to the main green belt tests. Certainly not the new ones for grey belt. You develop that site, it is not going to contribute to urban sprawl. Yeah. So subject to all of the other stuff about good design, I mean, it's absolute common sense that's for me that site should be developed. But
then there's another test to it, which I don't really understand why the NPPF has not put into the grey belt definition. So you can be grey belt because your land is not contributing to stopping. This is all these double negatives. It's not contributing to stopping coalescence of settlements, encroachment in the green belt, basically. But then you have to say, okay, it's grey belt, but can I build on it? Only if it's sustainably located. Yeah. Why not put the sustainably located in the definition? So it has to be land that doesn't contribute to stopping these things, and it's sustainably located, because people are going to go, well, my site is grey belt, so I can build on it. Hang on a minute.
But I think anyone.
What is sustainably located?
Well,
exactly
800 metres, probably. Some people would say, but
from what?
Amenities,
such as. I'm pushing you.
The shops.
One shop or one bus a week or whatever.
That's the whole thing.
We have no idea at the moment. There's case law coming forward from PINs. But actually, that is just so woolly, because some people are assuming sustainably located is you've got access to public transport and local facilities, like my multi-time place. You can walk to the local school and a shop and whatever. Other people are saying, well, actually, if you've just got a road linking a site in the countryside, well, then you can drive somewhere, so it's sustainably located. But then, of course, we've got the golden rules on top of that, which is 50% affordable housing. Or is it 30% affordable housing?
Well,
it changed,
50 or 15 above.
Whatever the local is.
What is at the moment, yeah.
So then you're saying, well, a lot of people are going to be living in these areas which maybe can't afford a lot of cars journeys. So what is sustainably located for affordable housing? Is that a different concept of sustainably located for big luxury whatever housing? I don't know what the answer to that is, but it seems like looking at quite a lot of the appeal decisions and stuff like that, and the way I've always thought about it, it's like, if you have to jump in your car to do everything, then probably it's not sustainable. But I'm not sure everybody agrees with that, and that's where I'm sure a lot of planning lawyers and barristers are going to be very busy
even
on this.
More rich as well.
Yeah, they can afford to buy something in the grey belt or build something in grey belt. It's an odd policy, and I personally think it's right that we review the way the green belt works and that we're using land better, and that should include housing in the Greenbelt, but I'm not sure. I think it's a very negatively set up policy that it's not contributing to damage. So but it's not. We're looking for sites which are going to make an area more sustainably located, because we want more housing in it. It means we can start to get some services in. Or we're saying, well, actually, that land is better suited for public amenity because of where it is, and people from the city it's surrounding, whichever city it is, can get to it and use it better. So maybe that land should be its purpose. If we had a purpose of the Greenbelt, which is to facilitate and support public access to nature and recreation and health, but we don't have, that's not part of the Greenbelt policy, and I'm so sad that they didn't actually put some positive functions for the Greenbelt, not rather than just negative, stopping things happening. And then we start to talk about the golden rules, which that do include, as well as the affordable housing, include open space, but it doesn't say how much, where, who can use it. It's kind of very, very woolly. So I'm hoping that gets.
You see, the thing is, this is super interesting, because I'm really liking this, because we are, like I say, the main reason for doing this is so that there isn't a fence, i.e. planners on one side of the fence and developers on the other side of the fence.
I'm not a planner, though.
No, I know, but it's good that you've got more that sort of
planning view. Yeah.
You are more that side, because I'm completely the other side in terms of I'm trying to buy sites, get them to stack up, do deals and all the rest of it, So I actually quite like the fact that things aren't too rigid, black and white, because otherwise you get 21 metres refusals, 100 have rooms, honestly, or at least you did in the past. So I actually like that there's a little bit of subjectivity to it, and you can have hopefully make your case. And and if it's a good case and you justify what you're doing and the reasons why,
But Paul, a lot of people who are developers don't want that subjectivity. The whole conversation we haven't had about design codes yet, if we need to, was a push very much from the development industry for certainty, so that it's kind of, I think it is a discretionary system. It has to be. That's what we've got in this country. You either make it fully not, or it is. Because if you have a certain requirement, which is there's certainty to it, it's still discretionary whether that requirement is applied to the planning balance. So that's kind of like the whole coding concept of, it's going to be so clear, as long as you follow these rules, you can build here. Well, actually, that's not how the system works.
Of course, we need certainty, right? But you're not going to get absolute certainty, because every site, every location, everything is different, including, and that coming back to the whole viability thing. Something might be a greenfield site, all of the services right there on the doorstep. I know about utilities and stuff like that. Super, about like the cheapest thing you could develop. Something else might be, a old factory full of asbestos, previously contaminated land uses, cost an absolute fortune to develop,
so
right?
It's going to be different.
So the problem is, so you can't have absolute certainty. And from my point of view, when you get like policies that say, well, it's got to be this way, at least half the time that will never work.
Yeah, because it's a planning balance. So we don't apply all of our requirements in a systematic and consistent way on every planning application. That's not how the planning system works. So that's one problem with having certainty through coding. But the other problem is, to set a clear requirement, you have to have evidence. And we recently had an event on writing policy as rules. And we had the speakers who came from the kind of coding community, as in the tech community, not the architectural coding community. And then we had a lot of planners, and there was such a divide there, because the people who want to write planning policy as code, because kind of like going, well, they love the 21 metre rule, absolutely love it, because it's very clear, you've done it, you haven't done it, tick, cross. In fact, AI will tell you whether the scheme meets it and it goes ahead or not. And we're kind of, as planning side of it, the conversation is, yeah, but why is it 21 metres? And what's the evidence to show that that is the right amount? If I'm going to put a new plump, because these existing ones have kind of like they're accepted because they're existing and everyone just takes them like Emperor's new clothes. But any new requirements that come in, I have to be able to evidence that I'm saying do exactly that is right, because I know that needs to be doing because of this research. And nobody in local authorities at the moment has got the time or the money, the resource to do that research, to be able to say definitively you need to do that. So you end up with requirements say you must consider, because they've been told they must put a must in, but they can't say you must stand on one leg because they haven't got the resources to check that what you needed to be doing is standing on one leg. So it kind of like that kind of disconnect in terms of the certainty. There's two elements of the certainty problem in planning. One is it's still a discretionary system. So even if you've got a certain requirement which is clear, it may not be applied in all cases because of the planning balance. And secondly, to set new requirements, very clear requirements, which can be codified, you need the research to be able to say that that is exactly what you need to do in that scenario, in that context, for that site, for that type of development, that site. That's a lot of work to check that in advance. And that's why we come back to a discretionary system where the divide is there, where the planners are going, well, I'm trying to manage this development as DM in the public good and still make it happen. And the developer is, well, I want to make it happen, but I also want to make sure it's good for most developers, I'm sure. So you kind of like, we go back to this built-in difference of opinion, or different perspectives. So this this thing we want certainty. For me, the more we did so much work on design codes for a few years, and the more and more I think about it, I get like, I'm not convinced.
Because that's an interesting one, and it's probably good to talk around that as the whole point about how fixed or not some sort of rules and policies should be, right? So again, for people that might be listening that don't understand, let's talk about design codes, because I think that's something you're big on.
I haven't talked about them for ages, which is great, actually. So design codes came in as a requirement for local authorities to produce them in, I can't remember, was it the planning? No, what was it called? The Act, LURA. What did it stand for? Gosh, somebody will know somewhere who's listening. Anyway, it came in under the last government.
The Levelling Up and
Regeneration Act, that's it. And there was talk about them before that, and they were in the NPPF before that. And the idea, the concept is a local authority looks at its area. This is how my interpretation of it anyway. Yeah. Looks at its area, says, well, we're going to have development here, 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 and this type of development, and that type of development. Now, let's set some clear ground rules for that type of development that's going to come forward, so that when developers come by those sites or take options and start designing schemes, they know what to expect, what's expected of them, and we'll have a smoother, clearer system through. And we have had examples of coded schemes which have been built out relatively quickly and easily, and coding was already a big part of master planning for large schemes with multiple phases, where you set some ground rules that will be developed in the detailed design phase by phase by phase, so the whole area actually works as a whole afterwards. So codes are not spatial, so you put in those terms, you put the code with the master plan or the layout, the spatial plan for that site, big site, and then you've got your parameter plans and your codes, and they work together. People were used to that. And then the idea was to take that concept of the code and strip it away from the spatial element that was for the big sites where it's used, and just used it for the whole authority. And there was such confusion because there was wording in one of the NPPFs and in the LURA about authority-wide codes. I personally can never get my head around what that was about. And for me, trying to work out what was useful is, well, look at design requirements across your authority and then focus your work down onto where codes are going to be most useful. And the first part of that is talking to the DM teams. What things come up again and again and again in schemes? can they be codified? Is it about roofs? Is it about basements? Is it about where the parking is or the cycle parking? Is it about bins? What is it that you're negotiating starting from scratch every single time because we haven't got guidance or codes on them, and then write that? That's kind of a systematic and pragmatic approach to using codes to smooth the system forward. And then, have you got certain characteristics or objectives in certain parts of your authority where you were going to require certain design approaches? For example, you've got different types of rural villages. Maybe some of your rural villages are homestead type villages where buildings, the relationship between buildings, they may all be on a line or they may be in squares or whatever, and the roofs are at different angles. So if there's things that are characterful that you want to see taken forward in new development, then in that type of scenario and context, you can code for that type of development in that type of character area or place. So you're looking at your whole authority, but you've got different character areas and you've got different requirements for different character areas because of the landscape or the heritage or the use or whatever it happens to be. So that's kind of the concept, as far as I understood it, as a sensible way of thinking about local authority requirement to write codes. So lots of them have written codes now. But as I said, it's the difference between code and guidance is small. In practice, in concept, is not small. Guidance is more try and do something like that. Code is do that. But as we've already said, is if you say do that, you have to be sure that doing that is going to work everywhere. So it actually ends up more like guidance. So a lot of codes are more like guidance, and it's no bad thing. I think
that's how it should be.
Yeah, it's no bad thing that we've got lot more local authorities who are being proactive about saying what they want in the design of schemes in their area.
Well, two things: having guidance is useful, right? And particularly for people that are perhaps less experienced and don't really understand it all and all this, right? So having guidance is definitely useful. Having really overly fixed codes or local authorities that try to impose them too strictly, I think is potentially really dangerous. And clearly, really good architects and developers should and hopefully would be doing all of that stuff anyway. Like really good architects know this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
If I was an architect, I'd be like, and I know lots of architects don't like this, right? Because they're like, well, we know what we're doing. We will analyse everything and we'll look at the character and we'll do all of that and come up with what we think is best for the site.
But codes, I think the concept is about stopping the worst. It's not about codifying the best. And unfortunately, the majority, I believe, of new housing development in this country is not architect-led. It doesn't see an architect isn't necessarily that involved in the schemes, whether it's small or it may be a building, an ex-building control surveyor who's done something, or there is somebody drawing up the scheme. Maybe more and more be AI, but the type of architect that you're talking about isn't involved in a large number of schemes. So the codes are about a bottom level of where that is the case. There is something there. I think from my conversations we've got fantastic architects in this country. We really do have a great architectural community. I don't think most of them worry, maybe they're going to say, I'm wrong, worry that much about codes because they can work with them, because it is things that they would be looking at anyway. And if they come up with a different solution, they can present that in a coherent way that will work. Because again, saying the codes, even though a code is do that, it's like do that unless the planning balance and the negotiation on this scheme means you don't have to do that. So even if your code is very clearly required, it is not like the building regs. You can still get planning permission where you're not meeting it if the rest of the balance works in that way. And that's the thing that people are really positive about. Definitive coding probably didn't quite get in their heads. But it means that those good schemes can still be what they are with the coding. It's just to try to stop the worst of the worst, basically. That's how a lot of people look at it.
Yeah. Which is fair enough. I mean, I must admit, it's interesting, actually. I know obviously, what with your, all the award stuff, you must see, I mean, I've got to say, I would love your job. going around looking at fans.
that is
Can you
pretty
get me on there if you can?
Honestly,
I would love just going round looking at
be.
fantastic,
You should be on it.
the best of development schemes. I mean, it must be fantastic.
Yeah,
But
you also see a lot.
But that's what I was going to come on to really. But I mean, yeah, you probably see a lot of bad stuff as well, I guess.
So so I'm on quite a number of design review panels as well. So the awards you're mentioning are the Housing Design Awards that Design for Homes run, which the chair now is Joanna Avery, who's the chief planner, MHCRG, and they've been running for many, many years. I think it was 70 years or something ridiculous like that when the planning system was set up. And there's 20 judges, roughly speaking, and you should be a judge, Paul, really. Ask David Birkbeck. Every year we go and we shortlist from 150 or whatever it is applicants. Half of them are completed schemes, half of them are the projects. Of the completed schemes, the shortlist is normally about half of the ones that have been applied for, roughly speaking, maybe a bit less, a bit more. And then we go and visit them. And it is incredible going and visit them every year. And you can see all of the visited schemes on the Design for Homes website, so there's lots of information about them, and you see the trends over the years. This year there's a lot of zigzaggy elevations seem to be this year's trend, but over the years we've seen a lot of different trends. But on design review panels, I do quite a bit of that over the years as well. You see a lot of schemes which are never going to reach a design awards standard, and often which shouldn't get planning permission, to be honest. Training and site visits to other stuff as well.
Let's talk the design review panel things, because I think that can be that's a really good system in a lot of ways.
Where a panel of independent professionals bring their fresh eyes to a scheme that the developer and their team and the local authority have already been talking about, generally speaking, to each other. Normally about 5 people on a panel. You normally got an architect, a landscape architect, someone who's into sustainability. Though it's just generally people who know a lot about, can read schemes really quickly and give some advice on them. The design review panel does not decide the scheme at all. It's just an advice system for the local authority. The local authority can use that advice when making their decisions, but generally speaking, design review should happen at the pre-app stage, so the advice is informing the negotiation, not the decision making at that stage. It's grown massively, design review. It helps identify any problems early on that could lead to delay or disappointment later on. At UDL, we've been helping local authorities to set up design reviews for a long time now. We do design ourselves. We do design review of public realm schemes that don't need planning permission for TfL and London boroughs. But we've helped in London. We've now, every local authority apart from the City of London has its own design review panel. So we've helped quite a few of those get set up, and we run a design review network kind of networking system. We just had an event with 100 odd people came to, where we were briefing them on that building safety requirements for tall buildings, so the panel members understand more what the implications are going to be when they're reviewing that type of building. So we do that regularly from UDL's side. And we've also recently published a code of conduct for design review. I'd like to tell you about this, actually, if you don't mind, Paul. So because we don't run it, but we know a lot about it, and different people in our team sit on different panels and chair different panels. We, in our role as supporting local authorities, knowing that more and more are setting up their own panels or are using them. So one of these get-togethers we asked everyone to write down what panel they represent on a piece of paper and hold it all up. There was over 60 panels in the room. We didn't even know there were 60 panels around the country, but there were just in that room. And we've started creating a directory of them on our website, actually, so there's more transparency. So more and more local authorities around the country are either using an established panel or they're setting up their own panels. So if you're a developer around anywhere in the country, the local authority may now start be asking you to present to a panel. It is in the MPPF, it says user panel. So this code of conduct was kind of saying, we're here to help local authorities, right? Let's help you understand what best practice is in design review. So we did a survey in the beginning of this year. 110 local authorities responded saying what their experiences of design review, and it was local authorities, this was too, experiences of design review, what they like about it, don't like, their worries, their concerns, how they help, how they're funded, etc., etc. And on the back of that, the answers, the responses are on our website, but anyone can see. We've drafted this code of conduct with support from, working with MHCRG and others, and we published it a few weeks ago. It's on our website, and it sets out the best practice. If you are taking a scheme to design review and you're paying, I don't know how much you asked to pay, Paul, but let's say you're paying $5,000 for design review or $6,000, I would really strongly suggest that you check that design review panel meets this code of conduct. Is your money going into it? If it does, it will be a better design review.
Yeah.
Transparency, conflicts of interest, briefings, the way the information is used, how the panel is procured, all of that is covered in there, which makes it a better system, because there's concerns about design review being closed shop, about not being transparent, about being elitist, etc., etc.
Yeah.
If it's meeting this code of conduct, it shouldn't be doing those things.
What's the code of conduct? What's it called? If people wanted to Google it, how could they find it?
National Design Review Code of Conduct on the UDL website.
Do you want to give the what's your website address?
Oh, it's urbandesignlearning.com.
Very good. Urbandesignlearning.com. There's lots of other good stuff on there, I know, so people should go and have a look at that anyway.
But on design review, that code of conduct is quite new. As I said, it's been developed with MHCLG as well and others, and it really is kind of like, really just check. Don't use a design review panel. Don't pay for design review if it's not meeting this code of conduct. It's not difficult to meet it, but there are panels out there that are not openly procured. There are a few mates sitting on a panel. There's panels out there which they don't know the background of that local authority. So the local authority should brief the panel. The local authority should never tell the panellists what to say or think, but they should ensure that the panellists know the context of the scheme so that they can be most useful in their advice, etc. There's things like that in there. Code of conduct. Because it's a bit of outside London. It's in early days for design review, and this is just meant to help make sure that it's as good as it can be, useful as. So, do you take schemes to design review?
Yeah, depends what it is and where it is.
Do you want to do it, or because you have to?
Well, I like to think that I'm identifying and addressing all of the things that a design review panel would address anyway and identify, right?
So you can get the support then.
Yeah, well, that's the reason for doing it. Is actually it's another tick in the box really, and I try to make sure everything's covered. And on a lot of that, the design review panel have had a look and they've said, yeah, it's great, it's fantastic. And maybe they'll come up with a few little things, and and if they're good things or can be incorporated,
sometimes they are,
I'll do it.
Sometimes they are. It really sometimes. Not with you, Paul, I'm sure, but sometimes the architects involved feel that the design review panel is very helpful with their relationship with their client, because they've been saying things to their client, we really should be doing this, and then the client won't listen to them, and then they'll listen to the design review panel. And then at other times, the local authority and the councillors. So sometimes the councillors are sort of like, they might sit in, or the chair of the design review panel might talk to the councillors, so it gives the councillors some advice on design where they otherwise, dare I say it, might end up kind of just talking about what it looks like, because obviously design is not about what it looks like primarily. It's about how it works, how well it's going to last, and also what it looks like. But it's a magic three. So, and not all design review panel, I've been on panel design reviews where the applicants walked out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they don't want to be there.
They just got pissed off with what people were saying about their scheme.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've been on reviews where the scheme seems so awful that the panel just goes, there's nothing we can substitute. You just refuse it. I've been on panels where I've felt incredibly embarrassed by what's being said by the panel members, because they obviously don't understand the scheme, or they've gone off on a tangent, or sometimes the panel members do think that they are deciding the scheme. I've got
to say, I have seen some where, because this is the thing, again, it's a little bit like, oh God, I've got to be really careful here, but like design officers or conservation and design officers, whatever,
they're
in
mixed.
local authorities, right? Me personally, right, I never use rubbish architects. I've been doing it a long time. I really am focused on good design. I think all developers should be. I mean, things are hard enough anyway without coming up with shit designs that's literally asking for trouble, right? But then it gets run past, a design officer who maybe 1 year out of university never actually designed anything in their life, and they want to be the designer. That is a pain.
Well, they might try to redesign the scheme, or they might not be very good at giving comments, and they may be very defensive or negative, or they may fall back on things that they think they should be saying, like, oh, we need defensible space, even though it may not be an irrelevant issue for that particular street or scheme. So that's why UDL exists, is to try to help to inform and support the officers to do the best job they can. And like any community, there's people who are more experienced and expert, and there's people who aren't. A lot of people the officers are very isolated, so they're not learning from each other or others. So public practice has been brilliant, actually. So public practice is putting people who have been designers in private sector into local authorities for a year around the country, and you can really see a turnaround of the culture of how design is approached. Where you haven't got that, and you maybe have some more traditional officers who are conservation and design officers. I was one, my early jobs as well. Then the fact that you're looking at the conservation of historic assets puts you into a mindset that maybe isn't always the best link across to looking at the design of future places. They are different things. They both need to understand three-dimensional concepts and spatial concepts, but the objective is quite separate. So some of the principles being applied are different. So I think that's not always the easiest combination of roles, actually. I think sometimes the landscape architect or the ecologist and the urban designer maybe have more in common. But that's my personal view, and I know having conservation and design offices is a very traditional thing in a lot of authorities, because they always had conservation officers, but they didn't have design officers, so they made the conservation officer into the design officer. It's it's an oddity.
Yeah. That's reminded me to ask you, talk about something I wanted to talk to you about anyway, actually quite interesting. Poundbury.
Yeah.
Discuss.
I was there not long ago, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I had lunch there. It's got a very clear identity. It had a vision, a horrible word in planning and design, but it had one, and it delivered it. Personally, I wouldn't want to live there. Personally, I find it... One thing I worry about it most is how it... Okay, I'll take it back a bit. The places we value most, generally speaking, and not always, but generally speaking, they mature well. So those three things that are good, good design is something that works well, looks good, and lasts well. Well, that lasts well is ability to adapt and morph and grow and mature and alter. So places that we really value tend to have a mixture of buildings from different ages, different styles, different materials, and not always, I'm thinking Bath or something like that, or Welwyn Garden City, but where even those places, they've got the ability to change. Where you've got something that's built as one thing, it's very hard, I think, for it to change. So it becomes stylized, it becomes dated quicker. And it's the same with some other housing, like kind of box housing schemes of like you say, I know when that was built, because nobody's able to really personalise their home, their property, change that bit of it, change that bit. And so Poundbury is what it is. People who live there, I guess, like it. It's got lovely facilities. It's got a really nice pub. It's got trees. It's got good views. It's got problems with parking. It's got, it's got Waitrose. It is what it is. But how will it be in 100 years? Is it going to be like a sad version of what it is now, or is it going to be Poundbury blossoming into the 22nd century? That's where I think it's less likely to succeed. Whereas places which are more organically designed and a bit more variety within them possibly are able to change easier. But I might be wrong. I don't know a huge amount about its layout and design. But what do you think about it?
Yeah, it is what it is. That stuff's not going to work everywhere.
Going back to the grey belt thing, is I'd love to see the grey belt development be required to innovate. Because I don't think we do have enough innovation. And you can say Panbury is a form of innovation and a brave form of innovation in some ways, but it's more about the architecture than it's anything else, I guess. But I'd love to see kind of using the grey belt, like, well, we talk about codes and we talk about grey belt and something's definitive. What would happen if all grey belt sites over a certain size had a code requiring no more than 15% of the site to be car accessible, or had a minimum density requirement of 70 dwellings per hectare, plus at least 20% of the site is open space? That would push it to different typologies.
I've got it. I love it. I've got one where I'm going to be doing it.
Right. So if that was required on all grey belt, because it's grey belt, we would see a revolution in.
Well, I wouldn't say you probably it might be a bit harsh to say all grey belt just in case, but I don't know. I suppose as a general principle. Yeah,
and then if you can't, you argue against it.
Yeah.
That would mean that we would be using a green belt, which we've been gifted by our forebears because of the planning policy. We'd be using it to support innovation in design, place design and architecture, and construction probably as well. So we'd start to see things more like the new neighbourhoods around Cambridge. By just those three requirements would totally change those schemes.
I couldn't agree more. Like Marmalade Lane, that's
well,
nice.
You could start to asking for co-housing as well, but if you and co-living, but if kind of like just stop building individual semis or detached houses with on-plot parking and giving over a lot of the land to the access routes to those car parking spaces, and require the sort of Tetris type homes, like we were in the Innovation District in Leeds 2 days ago, and seeing the back-to-back homes that there's on the river, that scheme, which is still being built out now, I believe, is almost finished, and that reaches about 100 and I think they said it was about 120 dwellings per hectare, something like that, maybe a little bit more. It's difficult, but there's one area of flats in it. But the housing itself is 2 to 3 storey housing. It's got roof gardens, it's got undercroft car parking shared, it's got fantastic walkways between the homes. It doesn't have 21 metres between the homes, and it can achieve the density and create a wonderful community neighbourhood.
Yeah, what's that one? I don't know that.
The Innovation District. I don't know if it's got a different...
Did you say Tetris?
Well, I was in Tetris type housing. That's the sorts of things you see there. Not so much, but the stuff, particularly in Great Knighton, isn't it? Or Eddington more than Great Knighton. Both of them to a certain extent, but Eddington around Cambridge. So you've got housing that kind of that one and that one are different homes. That one's got its front door here, and it's got a bit of housing here. This one's got its front door here and a bit of housing there. This one's got its garden on this roof. That one's got its garden on that roof, etc. You've got who
are the architects?
There's a variety. So the coding, I think, in Cambridge is supporting this type of housing. In Marley, which is a different scheme, a different architects, they've got muse houses where they've got the garages for the houses over here on the main road. And they've got flats above the garages, blank wall to blank wall, quite close together. Both got good outlooks the other way, and you've got this kind of Tetris type. What I'm calling them that. I don't think anyone else is calling them.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And you can I'd love to see more experimentation of that sort of thing. Maybe experimentation's the wrong word because it's people's homes you're talking about here, but more innovation and more use of that type of approach, which got you get some fantastic green spaces with it, and shared space. Go back to my multi-time place and your home circle and your neighbour space. Spaces you're using with a few neighbours, not masses of neighbours, but a few neighbours, where you can manage that successfully, it seems, through the schemes that have been built in terms of behaviours, etc. And people, it's not for everybody. You can't build like that everywhere. But I think the grey belt is an opportunity to do to require something like that, to move, shift it. Otherwise, we're going to see boxes.
I've got a grey belt site where I want to do pretty much what you've just talked about, because I think that will be a really good thing to do. And you can get high densities and make
what
deals.
What is it, 70 dwellings per hectare?
Well, it can be even more than that.
Even more?
I'm actually going to, and it is grey belt, so if the worst comes to the worst and I have to go and win it at appeal, I will. I would much rather try to negotiate it.
Yeah.
But so I'm literally going to, but the problem is, you see, it's interesting from a developer's point of view. If you're doing something a bit unusual, it's a risk, because you don't know whether it's going to be a local authority that, wow, that's really good, we like it and they're going to support it, or it's going to be, no, 21 metres.
You can find out a little bit, can't you?
You can do a bit of research, but this is the thing. As a developer, it's risky enough anyway. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons people do standard stuff. I'm not saying it's right.
I totally understand that.
So I'm gonna, and I don't always do pre-apps, but I will do on this one because I'm going to put two schemes in front. I might even put three schemes in front of them. And one of them is going to be standard developers volume housing, which I totally don't want to do, but part of it's just for the contrast. It's look, do you want what do you think's better? Surely that is better than that,
I totally understand it, and that's kind of like from our side at UDL, we're having those conversations. So we have about 10,000 bookings a year from local authority people at the events, and I hope we raise expectations for the officers who would find something different, scary and difficult to deal with, to give them the support and some confidence and some information to help them deal with that. The people are people, there's different people and there's different motivations for how they behave and act. But without information and without seeing what can be done, without knowledge, then behaviours in the local authorities don't change. They don't change. And it's really sad at the moment. There's government money going into getting more planners, but there's not really government money going into getting more informed planners. It's kind of get bums on seats, use your capacity and capabilities money to get some consultants in and get rid of your backlogs of DM backlogs, which is really important. But it also, I personally think MHCRG really needs to start to think about not just the number of planners, not just whether or not they're using digital tools well, but their own knowledge, experience and confidence, and how they relate that to others around them to change a culture which would support the sorts of things that you're talking about, the experiences that you're having. And often it's not, you can't blame the officers, they just don't know any differently, or they are pushed in that way by managers or counsellors or whatever it is. And planning is very, what is the word? I can't think what the word is, but it does, because of the judicial element of it and the case study bit, planners do tend to copy what's happened before or copy what somebody else has done because they feel more secure with that, because it's got through there. So the concept of precedent is not meant to be part of planning, but in reality I think it really is. So if they've got their fingers burnt with a different type of scheme somewhere else, they're going to be reticent, or seen someone else have a problem with it, then they're going to be reticent to take it forward. You see like design guides or policy that's been done in one authority is copied somewhere else, and behaviours are as well. Yeah. That doesn't help you very much, does it?
No, well, look, I mean, I suppose all that's done is highlighted the fact that it's not easy for anyone, planners, developers. Hopefully, by talking about this stuff, we can all, that's the whole point, understand each other more, absolutely, and start working together.
Well, it's great that you're doing this, and it's kind of like getting that information out there. And it feels like there is more, like we provide training for the local authorities. So does PAS, Planning Advisory Service. They do a lot of great work with the local authorities, but who does it for the developers? Who provides developers, particularly small, medium-sized developers, with information, support, knowledge, training, anything.
Well, that sounds like an advert for Millbank Land Academy. There's industry organisations. Obviously, you've got the Home Builders Federation, Federation of Master Builders, but who are good, really good, really good. But they're a bit more like policy wise, and we're all, lots of us trying to do it. We just got to keep on. If you could wave your magic wand and make one thing happen to get more good quality housing created.
Oh, blimey.
What would that be?
Really hard. I suppose as a policy planner, I would like to see come back, and I haven't thought this through. There used to be a policy in the NPPF, or before that as well, early NPPF, that if you're doing development, take the opportunity to improve a place. It's a very woolly policy, and it wasn't worded exactly like that. But I think as a concept to get across all the elements of the industry, to have that back, because we don't have it now, to understand that change can be good, and we should take the opportunities that change provides to make something better. If you flow back from that, you have to understand context, you have to understand what good design is, you have to understand what people are and what people want, etc. So you have to understand how the environment is working in that place, so you know what you can make better through change. Because I think at the moment we're just going for let's just build change without understanding how we can use it beyond housing numbers. So the betterment at the moment is about more people having a home to live in, which is great, but I think we actually need something more substantial than that for each scheme to contribute to its environment. I don't think that's not that. It just came to my head, Paul. I don't think that's the one thing that would make a difference, but I would like to see a policy like that back, because I think it can flow into lots of things. I suppose what the conversation we've just been having, and what I can say from UDL's side, is more and better informed planners who have the capacity to work constructively and positively with more and better informed developers.
Very good.
Fantastic.
Thanks for tuning in to Inside Property Development. Please remember to like and subscribe. Do join us every week, where we'll be speaking to house builders, developers, experts, planners, and everyone involved in trying to get more much needed housing created the right way. We'll learn together how we can collaborate rather than fight, and by working together we can all help create better places, spaces and homes, and a much more beautiful world.